Aaron Rouse, who's a Norfolk, Virginia Beach native. Can I say both?
Yes, you can say both. Yeah.
And yeah, because you represent all of that over there on the south side.
Most
sure.
definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So no, man, thank you so much, guys, for coming on the show. I feel we're weird talking like this because y'all been family for a long time. So, but we try to do this professional as we can right here. But no, as we get into it, one of the things we like to do in this show is just have you kind of talk about your journey, because we're trying to have this platform to really give young people and others who watch the show an opportunity to find out more about you. Both of you guys have been, Aaron, more recently, you've been back in a more professional role, but now you've been in and out. You just recently really retired, no more than a couple of years ago. So, tell us a little bit about your journey, coming up through Norfolk, because you're one of the very few guys I know, when I met you, it looked like I looked on a roster and I saw, here's a guy that went to Booker T High School and then turned around and went to Norfolk State and then made it to the league. that's a heck of an accomplishment. So tell us a little bit about your journey through Norfolk and where you are today.
Sure. So like I said, I'm from Norfolk, the Azalea Garden area, which is Princess Anne and Military Highway. That's where I was raised. Was supposed to go to Lake Taylor, but my dad didn't want me walking across Military Highway going to school, so I took the bus over to Booker T. Man, I would tell people going to Booker T is different. You got to be a different type of person to make it through that school. You know what I mean? It's just where it's centered geographically, it's tougher. Was blessed to play football, kind of excelled, academically and whatnot. And the first time I stepped on a college campus was when I went to Norfolk State University in 2003 to watch my older cousin, who was at Morgan State, play against Norfolk State. Right now, to that point, nobody in my family had been to college. Nobody in my family even thought about going to college. I mean, the rep we had was guys have babies when you're 17, women have babies when you're 17. Drop out of high school or make it through high school and start working. Right, so I was blessed to not follow that path. Received a full ride at Norfolk State. That's another story in itself. I don't want to hog all the time, but I eventually, received the full ride to Norfolk State after being rejected the first time around. Because to be honest with you, I wasn't the smartest, fastest, strongest, coming out of Booker T. I wasn't even the best player on the team. So I get a shot at Norfolk State University, and I make the most of my opportunity. I start, since my freshman year, and I was extremely highly productive, right? And for me, I wanted to make it to the NFL, but I never cared, right? I just wanted to play football, right? I just wanted to do every practice was like a throwback and run day for me. Like I love the game. I love studying. I love, watching somebody give up when you got the best of them. Those things I live for. And I was blessed to get drafted. We can go deep into the nuance of this later, but I was blessed to be drafted first and only player drafted from Norfolk State in the D1 era. Went on to play 10 years in the league, and now I'm blessed to be elected as a upcoming city council member for Chesapeake.
Aaron, I want you to kind of go into your role because, like I mentioned, I didn't know this before. I don't know where I saw it. I read it that you were originally from Norfolk. Your parents, your mom or something was from Norfolk, and now you went to high school in Virginia Beach, right? Can you give us a story of your process?
All right. Thanks, Carl. First, Don, I think, even I'm learning more about Don. I wanted Don to keep talking because I want to learn more about Don as well. I think, we have so many athletes that come from my area, and a lot of times, we know the name and we know the face, but we necessarily don't know their story. For me, I grew up in Youngs Park. I'm from Youngs Park. They call it Young Terrace. Today, I went to Youngs Park Elementary School. Played for the Clovers since I was 8 years old. And my mother, she raised four of us by herself. I got older twin sisters whose birthday on Christmas Day. My father, he's been in and out of jail, and currently he's incarcerated. He's doing 63 years in prison. And so for me, my mom's biggest thing was just to, go to school, and just graduate from high school. That was, and stay out of trouble. You know, I think for the most part in Norfolk, you know, we had two main statistics that they gave us was either you'll be dead or you're in jail by 18 or 21. You know, it wasn't necessarily you can be the pro football player, you can be an astronaut, you can be a lawyer, a doctor. It was pretty much, listen, 18 to 21, either two places you're gonna end up. And so football was sports, and not even necessarily football. Sports was my outlet. It was a way for me to stay out of trouble, stay away from the gangs, you know, not steal drugs, not to follow in my father's footsteps. But it also helped me. It allowed me to vent a lot of frustrations that I had, you know, growing up in a single parent household. But I really take my hats off to my grandfather, who he was there, but he wasn't necessarily in the household. But he was someone who instilled a great work ethic in me. You know, he was the one that basically put a lawnmower in my hand at the young age of 9 and was like, all right, you got to go to work. And why that's significant is because prior to the age of 9, my grandmother was the one who was basically helped my family out with birthdays and Christmases and holidays and cooking. But she died from breast cancer at a young age of 49. And so when she passed, you know, Christmas was basically over in our household because, number one, my sisters, who are twins, their birthday is on Christmas Day. And then my birthday is 2 weeks later, on January 8th. And so when my grandmother passed, my mom did everything she could to make sure they had a birthday. And it was like, all right, you get this basketball, or you get this belt, or you just get a pair of jeans. And so my grandfather was the one that came in, you know, Army veteran, and he had a, you know, North Carolina boy, worked on a farm, sharecropping. You know, his dad and them were slaves, and my grandfather was born in 1918. And so I really appreciate him because he put that work ethic in me from the very beginning. And so I went from cutting grass in Norfolk, and not out y'all's park, you know, Don would tell you out Ghent neighborhood where they had money at. You know, he would say, take that lawnmower over there to Ghent and make that money and save it up, help your mother out and bring it back. We only moved to Virginia Beach my end of my 5th grade year from Young's Park. I would have went to Ruffin Middle School and then Booker T. But right before, my sisters went to Ruffin Middle School, and right before, my mom moved us to Virginia Beach. And we thought it was a step up because going from Norfolk, Young's Park to Bricks, like, you ain't have central air conditioning. You know, you better be lucky if you get the fan that night. You had to be still in the Bricks that night. And so when we moved to a historical community called SeaTech in Virginia Beach, you know, I didn't think it was the hood. We had central air conditioning. And that was like, man, we got AC in here. That's a step up. We moved up in the world. But then, you know, noticeably, you start going to school, and the median income in Virginia Beach is a lot higher than it was in Norfolk, you know. So parents and kids, and I learned this in high school, kids driving Beamers and Benzes and Hummers, and my whole family, all 6 of us, we fit in a little Chevy Nova, you know what I mean, talking about get off me. And so right then and there, I didn't quite understand the world, why the world I was growing up in, why it was shaped that way. And so, again, football was my outlet, and I had a talent for it, where my junior year in high school, I caught the attention of, you know, Frank Beamer. And this was Virginia Tech, and you know, Carl and Vernon, y'all know this is where Virginia Tech was coming off their national championship run. And so for me to see guys like, you know, Michael Vick in there, and Andre Davis and Ronyell Whitaker, you know, Ronyell Whitaker from Young Park too. So when Ronyell went to Virginia Tech, and then I seen him on national TV, and I'm like, that guy from where I'm from, he's there. And then next thing you know, Frank Beamer's in my school. It was no doubt in my mind where I was going to go, but I was only a junior in high school. I didn't think about, you know, necessarily going to college. I just loved playing the game like Don. And so we got this full scholarship, and it was just, it was one of those things where it opened so many doors, because once we couldn't afford college either. It wasn't even an afterthought. It was just graduate from high school and don't go to jail. And we can get into it, you know, more later. But once Frank gave me, you know, offered me that full ride, went to Virginia Tech, I ended up having a son my freshman year. So I was a father, a full-time student, and an athlete trying to perform out there, get my college education. Was fortunate enough to, actually, if I would have left my junior year, I probably would have been a higher draft pick, but I still was fortunate enough to be drafted to the Packers. I got 3 years in before I got into a bad car accident and I couldn't play anymore. And the reality of it was my mother to really sit me down and have me confront the reality of sports is not forever. It was never intended to be your life. It depends on how much you put up here, how much you learn, and what's going to determine how successful you really were or were going to be. And so once I retired from the league, I got into politics by way of James Church. You guys know James Church.
The great James Church.
Right. And we can dive into that later. But I got into that way, and then the rest is history, so to speak.
No, that's good.
James kind of served as a mentor for both of us, actually.
Yeah.
Which I know we probably bring that up, but it just goes to speak of the importance that a man, the important influence that a man can have, on not only just us two, but other individuals he's touched as well. So.
Oh, fact.
No, and so that's interesting. Both of you guys touch on that. I wanted to go back to your college time period for just a moment with this question, and as we kind of move up to a little bit about the professional aspect. But there's always sentimental, challenging moments that we've had, I think, collegiately, whether you play ball, haven't played ball. Could you just take us through? I mean, Aaron, you just mentioned a couple of examples of some challenges you had. Don, I know you had some, but could you talk about just maybe one or two examples of the environment and whether through mentorship, was it family to help get you through some challenging times? Because we've got a lot of student athletes that are watching us, and non-student athletes for that matter, that are always going through some challenges in terms of, as you look back, it's like, man, I'm glad I did that thing, or, you know what, if I had a chance to correct this 2 things or whatever. Could you just give us maybe an example or 2 while you were at Norfolk State, Don, and same thing, Aaron, while you were at Tech?
Yeah, I would say in terms of from an athletic standpoint, and I almost messed this up my freshman year, falling into the same old Norfolk State mindset at the time, right? So Norfolk State around that time, you'd be lucky if you won 2 games, right, for the entire season. And the mindset was, if we win, we partying. If we lose, we partying. So regardless of what the outcome of the game was, we was gonna be in the sweatbox, right? we was gonna be partying, right? And so my freshman year, I was like the little brother. I mean, I was a small guy, 5'9", 145 pounds, starting at safety. So I was just happy to be around, you know what I mean, with the guys. But it wasn't until coach kind of pulled me aside and was like, bro, I didn't bring you here to be another one of these dudes, right? I brought you here because you reminded me of someone at the time. He said I reminded him of Rasheem Mathis, who goes on to play 14 years in the NFL.
Yeah.
He said, look, you remind me of this guy, and, what you're showing me now ain't it. So I really had to make a decision and a mindset shift that, okay, the things that I see cats doing, I mean, if I want to continue to be a part of a losing program, I'll keep doing that. But seeing that we don't really have, right, and enough individuals, I can't say not everybody, we didn't have enough individuals with that mindset of I'm going to do what's necessary to help turn this program around. I took that route, and I had a lot of help in that. So I'm not saying I was an island all unto myself. There are 2 individuals who I credit with my football success from collegiate on. One name is Daniel Hammond, and the other one was Andre Twine. Now, these were 2 older guys who set me down and showed me how, number one, to watch film, how to apply the playbook to what we were in the game plan, to what we were watching, showed me how to have a work ethic, you know what I mean? So an effective work ethic, I should say. So, I mean, I was one of those guys, when the team was running, I was running. Team was lifting, I was lifting. But they showed me how to take it to the extra mile. And the time that I spent with them my sophomore year, I literally saw a 30-pound jump, you know, from being 160 to 190 pounds going into my junior year. Consequently, that was also when I began to flourish, like really flourish as a football player. I mean, I lead the conference in interceptions. I make 6 game-winning plays in a row that got us to the MEAC championship, which we ended up losing. So many guys were now looking up to me because I made that mindset shift that I'm not going to follow what I'm seeing. I'm going to be the individual that helps to turn the program around with the help of others as well. And it really played out. Now, as far as off the field issues, university life was tough, right? Because number one, I'm the first person in my family to make it to this point, right? So I had my stepdad. I didn't have my dad. I had my stepdad and I had my mom. Who can I call? You know what I mean? When I'm struggling with the load, I mean, I can call them. They'll give me the advice, but in terms of somebody experiencing that, I didn't have that. So it was tough, you know, being able to navigate life as a college kid, and then the workload of being an athlete as well, and then being productive. But by God's grace, man, I was able to do it though.
I think, you know, for me going to Tech, you know, Tech art had the formula, the down pat, right? You know, they Michael Vick helped put Virginia Tech on the map, so to speak. And for me coming into that era, on the field, we had the leaders. I mean, talk about Big Dunn, Jim Davis, Ranya Whitaker, Vincent Fuller, and, you know, all the Fuller brothers there. They're the later Fuller brothers, but Vincent Fuller, Ranya Whitaker, Garnett Wiles, Jason Lawless. I mean, the Nathaniel Deeby. I mean, the list goes on. So for me, someone young coming in to that football program, we already knew what time it was when you stepped on campus, you know. But if anything, criticism I would have of the program, there was so much attention focused on the football aspect of it and wanting to solidify us on that main stage of what the Oklahomas and Miamis of the world. And Alabama's aware that there wasn't enough attention paid to developing the mental aspect of the player, you know, so to speak. And for me, you know, off the field, again, like I said, I dealt with a lot. I mean, student athletes in themselves have full days, you know, so it always kind of irks me when you have non-student athletes talk about, well, they get a free ride. Like, and Don can tell you, there's no such thing as a free ride for a student athlete. I mean, you rarely have any time for yourself. And so for me, I didn't do myself any justice by having a kid, but I can tell you my son, who will be 17 years old this year, he is, I tell him all the time, you are the reason why you helped me get through college. You helped me, you know, graduate first. You helped me be successful because, like, again, my meager background is where I came from and got dropped off. I was just like, this is a whole new world. My mom just dropped me off as well. Matter of fact, we had to pay somebody to drop me off at school to take me to school. And it's like, that's it. You know, there was no turning back. And so you have to make the most of it. And so for all those kids or student athletes who are listening, first of all, it's about being accountable and accepting responsibility. You know, I'm the one who decided to have a kid. I could not point fingers at no one else. I couldn't say, well, I can't go to football practice. I can't go to class. It's about accepting your responsibility and facing it head on. And so a general day for me, it was, you know, once we found out we were going to have a kid, we were going to have a son. I remember sitting down with Coach Beamer and the coaching staff and his, you know, big Coach Beamer office, big long table. And I'm sitting there, you know, and nervous as heck. And I say, Coach, listen, I know it's a requirement for student athletes to stay here throughout the summertime and spring to get stronger for the upcoming season. But, you know, I can't stay here. You know, I'm going to have a kid and I'm going to go home. But I give you my word, you know, I'm going to come back in shape. I'm going to be that player that you invested in as well. And Frank, he gave me the support, but they voiced their hesitation on, listen, like, we've seen this before. I wonder if you're really going to come back, you know, let us know how you can help. But I didn't think they understood, the fact that once again, my grandfather instilled in me 3 important values. Your word is your bond. You work for everything that you want, and most definitely, and last but importantly, not least, you keep God first. So when I came home, I got a job working concrete. Getting up early in the morning, going to work that concrete, using malls, breaking all that stuff out, being the youngest man on the concrete line with all the old heads out there, right? But they would drop so much knowledge on me, and it helped me realize just how important education was. And mind you, and if that didn't work, picking up 300, 200-pound malls or 50-pound malls and 200-pound concrete, pulling that will burn concrete, that would teach you too. And so once I got off from work, I would train. I would do the foot drills. I would catch the footballs. I would run the sprints. So by the time when I went back to school, and I passed my conditioning test, they was like, oh wow, okay, he came back, he in shape, and listen, he's on par to do exactly what he said he was going to do. But I think the most interesting part is the fact that you go from weightlifting, film study, class, papers, practice, games, that pressure to perform on that stage, 68-some thousand people. I like to think Virginia Tech helped solidify the Thursday night games, right? And so it helps solidifying that, and we getting ready for these games. And my position coach at the time, Coach Jim Kavanaugh, was a solid coach. He was a hard coach, but he was a solid coach. He knew his craft very well, but making sure you are ready to perform on that field. But for me, so much focus I had to give to performing on that field, not to mention the classroom. But soon after we go out there and we beat a Miami or a UVA, I got to throw some shots out there. We beat a UVA, right? I was hopping in my Chevrolet Caprice to drive 5.5 hours all the way back home to Virginia Beach to see my family, and I would, early in the week, I would have to get up at 5 o'clock, an hour ahead before I got to be in the weight room to do half of my papers before Friday got here, before we go to the hotel, the night before the game, do those papers, get half of it done, knowing that I was going to drive home after the game. And then I had to be back by Monday, before 8 o'clock a.m. so we can have, we can debrief and watch film study, recap. And so I felt like a lot of the times I could not, again, it wasn't about me being upset with nobody. It wasn't about me being bitter. It was about, listen, if this is the pathway or choices you made, decisions you made, and you have to necessarily suffer the consequence, you got to accept that adversity, because it's going to make you a better person. It's going to push you forward. It's going to push you to get in that weight room early, so to speak. It's going to push you to go to class, because you realize I had to realize I had a young one on the way. I could not, I ain't going to class today. You know what I mean? I'm not going to put in the word. No, I got to get my college education, because now I want to make sure I leave a legacy for my son and for my kids to come after that. The other aspect I want to touch on, and I know this is because I dealt with this through high school and playing Pop Warner ball, is that, one of the, if not the only benefit of not having, a father in the household was you had to talk up for yourself. And I say that because a lot of times, like at Virginia Tech, they wanted me to stay at outside linebacker, knowing full well, I felt as though I'm versatile enough to play safety. And so it wasn't about becoming the cancer on the team or talking about what coach is it going to give me, or talking about, oh, I should be having to do this or that. It was about, all right, if you're a man and you want to be treated like one, go sit down with the head coach and say, listen, I want a fair shot. Give me an opportunity. And then once you ask for that, be ready to back it up, be ready to go out there and say, all right, I'm about to prove to you what I can do. And so Coach Beamer, again, I remember winter workouts. I said, Coach, I can play safety. I know I'm 6'3", 210, 215. I can play. And I had another guy who played at corner, Jimmy Williams, who was an All-American. And I was like, listen, Jimmy Williams, like 6'3", 210, 250. He can play corner. I know I can play safety. And so that helped out a lot. And Coach Beamer was like, all right, I'll give you a shot. And he gave me my shot, and the rest is history, So again, I think it's about, with any problems that you may have coming before you, accept it, accountability, accept the responsibility, and then be prepared to work your butt off to prove people wrong. Don't just think it's just going to be given to you.
Well, it's funny because I didn't really know a lot about your story either, Aaron, to that degree. And I think about, I'm always a little bit more sensitive towards guys that go to HBCUs because it's so hard. The journey is so tough, to get that opportunity. And I wanted to touch on that with you, Don. I mean, like I said, man, when I first heard about you, I was looking through a roster. I was getting ready to go to a team meeting, and I was looking through a roster, and I saw Norfolk State, I saw Booker T, and I saw Norfolk, and I was like, how did I not know this kid? I said, and to actually meet you and to engage with you. Tell me a little bit about your recruiting and how that happened, because I think that is a very, very unique space. I mean, you never left the city of Norfolk, Virginia, and made it to the NFL for 10 years. That's really not an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm. So you sound like my recruiting from Booker T to Norfolk State, or Norfolk State to the league?
No, from Booker T to Norfolk State. Like, what were your offers?
All right, so all right, so as I mentioned, I was a late bloomer, definitely, right? So at Booker T, I was the third option when it comes to offense. I was a pretty good defensive player, but I was never the best on the team, right? We had a guy named Antoine Thompson who was getting looked at heavily by Virginia Tech. We had Terrion Conyers who gets a full ride to go to William and Mary. These were the two staples of the team, right? And I mean, I was productive in my own right, but never on par as Aaron or those guys. To be honest, like I said, I was out there because I love playing football, and I remember making my own highlight tape on VHS. Right? So I'm dubbing my highlight tape on VHS at Booker T, and I remember thinking, man, I don't have a William and Mary looking at me. I don't have a Virginia Tech like those other guys did. Man, we even had guys getting offers from like Colgate University, like Ivy League and Patriot League. I'm not getting none of that. So I said, at least I know I can maybe get a shot at Norfolk State. So I send my bootleg, highlight tape over to him, and the coach at the time gives me a call back, very cordial. He said, "Look, son, I just want to tell you, I don't think you got it. Whereas I don't think you're good enough to play on a D1 level." It was like, maybe I should go look at St. Paul, which was a college at the time, or maybe I should go look at Virginia State, right, and try something like that. And it was crushing. And honestly, it was enough for me to give up wanting to play football, right? So I'll give you some backstory I didn't speak earlier. My father left my mother to raise my three sisters and I when I was 2 years old, right? And that rejection was so heavy on me that literally I used to write like letters, expressing how I wanted to die, because I didn't know how to verbally, right, tell what I was dealing with, so I would try to write it down, right? And then I see like the rejection I had going up through school, because I was never like one of the cool kids. I was always like a little nerdy, a little awkward in large spaces, so I was always off to myself. So I was never really in that crowd of being one of the popular kids, right? And then come along with this rejection from a cat from Norfolk State who just won 1 or 2 games the year before, telling me I didn't have it, right? So I literally took a step back and said, I don't want to play football no more. Right, I'm done with this. It took me to a place, right, that I had hidden in my heart, put in a box that I didn't want to deal with anymore. That rejection I'm talking about. And it just so happened that, man, this cat ends up getting fired, right? And then comes, this old Italian cat named Pete Adrian, from Bethune-Cookman. He was the defensive coordinator at Bethune-Cookman, takes the head coach job at Norfolk State. And he gives me a call. He gives me a call and says, "Hey, man, you remind me of this guy, that I coached years ago, right? Named Rasheem Mathis, and I would love to give you a full ride at Norfolk State University." And I actually hung up on him. I'm like, "Look, I'm not hearing nothing you got to say. A few weeks ago, y'all just told me I wasn't good enough, right? Like, I'm tired of this trash." But my stepdad, he said, "Look, man, you need to call him back and see what they're talking about. At least give him an opportunity." So I picked the phone up, gave him a call back, and the offer was legit, right? And I end up being the third person to sign for Pete at the time. Now, I say that to say this. I would have never thought I would have played football, you know, in on a collegiate level, right? It was a dream of mine. It was a goal of mine. But after being rejected and after not really being the best player, after not being, you know, highly recruited coming out of college, I mean, they had just started Rivals, this thing, you know, there's real big now, and heck, I ain't even have a star, right? So I'm this kid just trying to get along to get a full ride. So Norfolk State meant so much to me, man. It meant so much to me that when I got on the field, I never relinquished that opportunity back, right? Off the field, I was a knucklehead my first year, but Don Carey on the field was probably one of the most intense people you would ever meet because I appreciated where I was at, right? And it wasn't TAC, it wasn't UVA, it wasn't William & Mary, it wasn't JMU, it was Norfolk State. But Norfolk State took a chance on me, you know, when those other schools would not. So when I step between those white lines, the least I can do is repay y'all by busting somebody's head for these next 60 minutes or whatever it is, 48 minutes like it was in on the collegiate level. So it was tough, man. And then to turn around and get to my junior year, we played Rutgers. You know, I have probably my best game ever in terms of making me viable to be an NFL player. One-on-one with Kenny Britt the whole entire game. And I mean, it was a long day for that brother, right? But no disrespect to him. He goes on to be a first-round draft pick to the Titans, plays a long time. It's just that day I got him. For the scouts to come in, to start coming into Norfolk State when they had not been there, right? And then for each one of them to come in and say, hey, look, if you don't do this, you're not going to make it. You know, we don't think you're smart enough. We don't think you understand, you know, playbook. We don't think the competition you're playing against is enough. Man, you 190, but you're still kind of small to be a safety. So all these cats coming in, I'm thinking, if you're coming to see me, you at least like give me some encouragement, right? Right, but cats. So but I didn't understand I didn't understand the business of the game, right? And like Aaron said, I didn't know my worth. Right, so when cats come in and saying, "Hey, you know, you're not good enough. If you don't start doing this, you're not gonna have a shot. Or the competition you're playing against is trash. Or the playbook that you're running is not really in depth." I mean, all those things was weighing down on me, man. Right, and it all took a toll. But there was one guy that came my junior year after we played Rutgers towards the end of the year from the Kansas City Chiefs. I never forget this. And he held me out of practice. The first time I've ever seen something like this happen. He held me out of practice, and he just worked with me, right? He just worked with me on things that I was struggling with at the time because our DB coach was learning as we was learning. You know what I mean? He stepped into a role coming from North Carolina. A small school in North Carolina, let's say that. So he was evolving even as the players was evolving. So there was a lot of things that technique-wise that I didn't know. And from this brother really spending his time with me tremendously helped my game from a technical standpoint, just that one practice. And then it gave me the confidence of, hold on, there's a reason this cat is coming to, 4 or 5 practices during the season and spending time with me. It's a reason, all these scouts are starting to come to Norfolk State. So even though they saying they don't think I'm good enough, y'all here, right? Like bro, you here. Right, and that was a huge confidence booster for me. And then going into my senior year was just phenomenal. I mean, after I had that confidence in myself with the intensity and my mindset on the field, I would at that point I was like, at least I can get a walk on. But man, to be drafted to the NFL was tremendous. It was a tremendous joy. But that struggle that I had throughout college. Right, and really growing up, I carried that as a chip on my shoulder when I got to the league. Right, so I never relinquished, that attitude that I'm gonna be the most intense cat you come across in between these lines. I give you my shirt off the field, right? I used to tell cats, look, man, I'm saved, but I ain't soft. Right? So if you're looking for
don't get me wrong,
if you're looking for me to pray for you on the field, brother, you got another thing coming. We can also get into some other things that kind of helped me solidify myself as an NFL player in the last 10 years. But coming from Norfolk State, the mindset shift that I had to take was one of really confidence, right? And there's so many individuals who would try to tell you what your worth is, like Aaron's hitting on. There were so many individuals who would say, oh, that's just another Norfolk State, he ain't gonna last long. I mean, Mel Kiper said, his words were, I may get picked up as a free agent and hang around for 2 years, as a special teamer, then that's it. I was like, hey, dang, that's crazy, bro, right? But the naysayers are kind of what gave me the motivation and confidence to really prove them wrong.
Oh man, I love that. I like that. That's dealing with that adversity and perseverance is always a challenge. And I think when we talk about adversity, the world that we're in now, I mean, every day we're hearing and seeing things that are happening. Police brutality, there's political things that are taking place. For Councilman Rouse, man, I got to tell you, when we're at an event, I remember Carl and I were at, I think it was a Priority Toyota event, charity game. And I remember you said, hey, I'm running for council for Virginia Beach. And literally something inside me was like, okay, that's a great transition. But in Virginia Beach, of all places,
yeah.
But I'm gonna tell you the level of excitement that I had and pride that you were taking that journey and what you've done thus far. And, we've seen some significant things with Pharrell and something the water that's transpired in the last, 12, 18 months. The unfortunate tragedy and some of the leadership you displayed during and post was something that was, again, we've shared some of these things privately, and even the opportunity when we had the HRYF camp last year and some of the players that came back, we had some private moments with some of the survivors of the tragedy that took place. In your 12, 18 months you've been on, you dealt with a whole lot of interesting and challenging things and putting that in perspective. And even right now, there's a lot of Black, brown, white, everybody that's stepping up and supporting, dealing with, a lot of the things in the community. Could you just talk about, and you made some statements in chambers that I was really, really impressed about. How are things from, maybe when you made some of those statements in a perspective and where we are now going forward, are there legislative things that you're dealing with? Could you just give us a sense of how you're progressing and dealing with some of these, what I would call daily changes, because we keep hearing about things each day.
Yeah, Vernon, thanks for that. I think what's most important is that, for a lot of time, people tend to discredit your experiences, your life experiences. We look for the qualifications, that they have a bachelor's degree, they got a master's degree, they got a high school diploma, but yet they look over the fact that you have real life experiences. Maybe you dealt with tragedy, maybe you dealt with certain successes, and all your real life experiences, the adversity that you had to work through in your personal life, they help prepare you for these roles or events that come along in your professional life. Listen to Don talk about, the HBCUs and what that's like, on the same level, but on the opposite spectrum, going to a predominantly white institute. It was really tough when you a school like Virginia Tech, and I love my school, and I'm a proud alumnus of Virginia Tech. But when Virginia Tech, I think at the time when I was in school, it was only 4% African Americans, and that 4% African Americans were mostly athletes. And I'm so proud to acknowledge today that we have a diversity and inclusion program now that tries to increase the diversity at Virginia Tech. And so for me, I always go back to, I wanted to study sociology like the greats, like Martin Luther King and those who come before him, James Baldwin and those types. But for me, I needed to understand, how is it that a guy that faced, again, single parent household, grew up in the hood, we were dirt poor, had to work throughout my entire life to get where I was. And along the way, my friends, some have ended up in jail, some have died, and some's dropped out of school. And how did I make it? How did I make it through? And so you talk about the political realm, whether it was something in the water I'm going to get to, or shooting them at May 31st, 2019. Also, we just hired, a new city manager, the first African-American city manager.
Congratulations.
And Virginia Beach history.
That's huge.
Yeah, definitely. And so for me, it was along the lines of, after I got the education and understanding of structure of society and those who look at the African Black male athlete, or even female athlete, because I think they deal with a lot more than we deal with, right? With glass ceilings and everything else. But specifically, when you look at the African American male or Black male athlete, the fact that someone could tell you just shut up and dribble, or you only matter on the field. To me, I take that as it placed a bigger chip on my shoulder to prove to them that no, we are way more than just an athlete. You know what type of skill level it takes to read a playbook? A dog can tell you that a defensive playbook is that thick, offense that thick, but don't forget special teams, and you got to know it all, right? But that even that mindset that we are some type of just a form of entertainment for your pleasure is one that I never was settled for. I would never settle for that stereotype. And so I had the opportunity after I retired to go up to Richmond, Virginia, our General Assembly. And again, once I got there, I got opportunity to just learn. I didn't care about if you were a D, if you were R, if you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican. I needed to know what goes on in this place, right? How are the laws made? Who's making the laws? Who's pulling the plugs? Who's, what are these committees? What are these commissions? What are these resources? You know why? Because downstream, when you at the bottom of the totem pole, all of that matters. It's a reason why, the schools I went to necessarily wasn't fully funded, or why our teachers don't get, fully funded or the pay they need, or why first responders still looking for money, or aspects of that, and why we don't have necessarily basketball courts in our neighborhood, why the streets not paved, why we don't have a street light or a stoplight, things of that nature. And I began to start understanding how important politics is, and once I started understanding that, I wanted to do more. I wanted to have more in my community than just a book bag drive, or just giving away supplies or coats or whatever the case may be, because those all are great and they're all are helpful, but I'm looking at long-term longevity. I want to change the narrative. I want kids, when they see me, not just to see, he played in the NFL. I want them to see, he's an accomplished, person. Matter of fact, he is a councilman. And I want to say, well, you can be one too. You could be a doctor. You could be a lawyer. And if you want to play sports, if you want to be a musician, that's great. But it doesn't stop you from learning. It doesn't stop you from continuously learn and progress. And I hope that you're able to live out your dreams. But you won't be able to do anything if you don't get it up here. And so understanding is, Vernon, like again in Virginia Beach, African Americans are only 19.5% of the population. White people make up 60%, 60% of the overall population, with Filipinos 11%, 11%, and then I think Asian make up the other 11%. And so knowing this, I became the youngest African American to be elected in the city of Virginia Beach, and only the fourth African American to serve on city council. And so while I'm sitting here, I realized, first of all, I didn't just come here just to fill a seat or to put a notch on my success board, like, oh yeah, now football player check, Virginia Tech, great player check. Oh, now that don't matter to me. What matters to me is our youth, our community, is our future. Where are we going? And so when you have an opportunity like Something in the Water to come along, and because of, football has allowed me to travel this great country and see what other cities have done, see the things they haven't done so well, see what makes, how they make their bread and butter. And then you just so happen to have someone like a Pharrell Williams, who is a world icon. And you have this culture at first, what says Greek Fest weekend. right? That left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And then you have the historical context where Virginia Beach is a city where African Americans could not walk on the boardwalk. It's 1965, 1960, they weren't even allowed on the oceanfront, you know? So you have that history, then you have Grief Fest, and then you have College Beach Weekend, and people going, we don't want to do something in the water. You're like, no, we don't want that to come down here. We don't, you know, first of all, those people, right? Those people come down here, they're not going to spend no money. And so for me being in this position, I had to challenge all of those stereotypes. First of all, what people are you referring to, right? Like, what do you mean? And then you have to challenge, well, first, what do you think? You think people are going to come down here and not do nothing? You know, let's give them something to do. And then talk about really erode those stereotypes of what we call deviant behavior, right? And what we know about deviant behavior. Yeah, anybody that's going to be able to just drink and just walk the strip all up and down the day, you know, all day long with nothing else to do, sure, trouble going to find them. Because alcohol and nothing else to do don't mix. And so pushing back against that, but also looking at the economic sides of it, so no, it's not only will this be great culturally for our city, but also it'll be great for our economy. This is something we need to do. You know, this is something where we need to stop looking at, you know, first of all, this weekend and African-American students, because that's what it predominantly was, you know, coming from Hampton or coming from Norfolk State or ODU surrounding colleges, traveling down from Virginia State or Virginia Union and really coming down to the oceanfront. And there's nothing for them to do here.
Right.
And then expecting like nothing else was going to change. So Pharrell Williams had this great idea of something in the water. And, you know, I remember speaking to him about it and not really, Pharrell has his mind, his vision. He's just Pharrell Williams. That's not the more else you could say, right? He has just this huge vision. And so I'm like, listen, you had me when it was like, all right, we want to make this, it's not necessarily about Black people. It's not about Black kids. It's about culture. It's about celebrating the individuality of everybody. It's about celebrating Virginia Beach's diversity. You know, Virginia's diversity. You know, we don't just have athletes come out of here. We have musicians. We have rocket scientists. You know, look at Hidden Figures. You know,
right.
We have so much to offer. And so highlighting that, I remember being at the convention center, Virginia Beach Convention Center, and we had over, it's like 900 some constituents there from all over the city. And I'm like the only elected official there, you know, and I'm having to answer all these tough questions. And I mean, you would have thought, people were asking me like Godzilla was going to come down the street or something. What you going to do if Godzilla come out here? And it's like, hold on, like get your, and Don would know about this because Don's, it's been in plenty of leadership roles. It's like, first of all, like, let's control that, right? And let's say we're not going to let our fears dictate our future, right? Let's control that. And we understand you got to have faith and hope, but also you got to prepare and plan. And our city and our staff planned and prepared like there was no tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so even I take my hats off to our police officers who having a tough time right now in our country, but our police chief at the time was Police Chief Jim Severa. We had to sit down with him and we ironed out all the details, all the differences of what to expect. And it was much more like now what I think needs to go on today of listening, right? Of listening and understanding what you are seeing, you know, because it may be different than you, don't make it wrong. You know, it doesn't make it an issue. And so having that understanding, having that conversation made for something in the water to be epic, you know, unfortunately enough, it, you know, because of the pandemic, it could not go on again this year. But you talk about a high of something in the water, and then right next month you have the mass shooting of May 31st. And man, that's just, even when I talk about it now, it just breaks my heart. You know, for a number of reasons. I mentioned, 12 people lost their lives, and it was just to have that. I experienced it, at Virginia Tech and back in 2007, and that was, that in itself was like, what in the world? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
no words can even you can't put it into words, because at that moment as a student, and I've just graduated, I was like still on campus, and I was going to visit the New York Giants the next day. And when that happened, it was just like, you're vulnerable, you're scared, and you don't know exactly how could this happen here. How could something so tragic happen in this community, this tight-knit community? So I remember feeling that feeling. And then after May 31st happened, having a feeling like, no, I refuse to feel like a victim. I've been here before. I've been there. And as a matter of fact, I know what other people are feeling like. So it's up to me now to help lead them through that, to say, no, we're not going to let this define us. In fact, we're going to define ourselves, how we respond to this. And try to be that guiding light, or that voice that says, listen, we're going to get through this, but the only way we get through this is if we get through it together. And that was, my whole messaging of that. And we're still healing from that. And so you have that, Vernon, and then you go on to what we're dealing with today of, the shooting of unarmed Black men, and killings of unarmed Black men and women throughout this country. And you're like, something has to give. Something has to change, and to be an elected official these days, and you're young, you're Black, you have a voice. And it is, and I take it very, very personal, not only because people who look like me, I would do the same thing if someone who didn't look like me were getting killed by those who were sworn to protect them, right? I would still speak up. But I'll be remiss to say it hits home a lot harder because they do look like me. And we understand the injustices of and the oppression of over 400 some years, and the implicit biases that are built into these systems, the housing system, criminal justice system, that is built into our educational system, built into our banks and loans, redlining. I mean, we understand this. To me, what I see now is just not even the 400 years, but the 60 or the 50 years the African Americans has just been free. How now we're saying we've marched, we sang, we've been nonviolent, we've asked, but to no avail. Now you're going to get off frustration. You're seeing it out loud, and so being in a position to mitigate, or at least help mitigate those terms. I understand I myself can't solve it, but I can help solve it. And it's going to take more than just the Black community to make a difference, and I think it would be a misstep for, my white friends and those who have a different race to think that the responsibility to solve our issues are solely on our shoulders.
That's right.
That's not, that would be unfair just to say, just say, well, you're in that position. You guys should lift yourself out those bootstraps. No, because, pull yourself out by the bootstraps, where there's no other race that's had to contend with their skin being the stigma, that's being the reason why you are in the positions of authority, or the reasons why you didn't get a house, or the reason why you are more mass incarcerated, or you get sentences. Your sentences are much heavier than those who aren't. There's no other race that's had to deal with that.
That's right. And
once people start understanding that, then we can start making progress. But I feel as though today, and I don't want to get too long because I want to hear what everyone else has to say. There's the internet is a gift and a curse, and I say this because going back to football, it don't matter what school you go to now these days, because if you're good, they're gonna find you. Everybody is social media, TV. I mean, they got football games on channels I ain't never heard of before, right? And if you're good, they're gonna find you. Ain't no more VHS like me and Don came up in. It's all about links now. Go to my link on YouTube, check me out, right?
Got a huddle link.
Right.
Right. So they're gonna find you, but at the same time, we, especially for this next generation coming up, we had to make them understand how important it is to have your morals, your principles, and your values in place, and the responsibility of what you post online, because everything you see online is not the truth. It's one perspective, and being in this political realm, people take what they find online and they run with it, you know, and then it leaves this space. There's this empty space there that nobody wants to step into, where before the internet, all you had was the confrontation, right? You had you had that human interaction. Now people have left it up to the internet for their interactions. Like, well, I'm gonna put this tweet out there and I'm gonna wait and see what somebody else says. But nobody is really going to the source and having those tough conversations. And that's what we need to have today.
No, that's good. So Don, how are you as a councilman-elect? And for those that are in the 757, everybody knows it's 7 cities, but those that are outside of the area, you know, we've had a chance to kind of get representation. We had Hampton Newport News represented last week. We had a chance to talk to Mayor Tuck and Councilman Harrison Newport News. You know, how is Chesapeake similar to Virginia Beach? Maybe talk about the demographics. How are you now approaching your position as you're transitioning into your new role?
Sure. So Chesapeake we're about 200,000, you know, fewer citizens than Virginia Beach, but we are the second largest city in the state. We're about 30% African American, right? So we have a much larger African American presence, mainly because the foundation of the city was a mergence between Norfolk County and South Norfolk. You know, South Norfolk was the premier spot for African Americans. Early 1900s. I mean, it's we have a much larger African American presence. In terms of what's going on and how our city is handling, you know, racial tension. The only issue that I have is individuals' unwillingness to see the nuance of the situation, right? So I'm not gonna say I hate, but I strongly dislike when individuals look at a situation from one lens, right? Because as human beings, we're never that black and white, right? There's always nuances to things. Now I'm not talking about the George Floyd situation. That's you can't get no more black and white than that. But I'm talking about as the human experience on a typical level. So for me, I think my immediate contribution will be to help individuals in leadership not only see other aspects of a situation, but to understand it, right? So for a lot of individuals who have never experienced police brutality, it's hard to really understand it if it's never been at your front door, right? For individuals who have never experienced, you know, racial tension, it's hard to really understand where someone is coming from, you know. And you see a lot of individuals, you know, throw stats out, you know, about, you know, police shootings or black on black crime and things of that nature. I would say they do that because they don't understand, like what Aaron was saying, the human aspect of people being killed unjustifiably. Secondly, I just don't think they understand the nuance and the importance of what it means to be human. I don't care if it was 5 people who were killed or 10 or 20 people who are killed. Anytime an individual loses their life in an egregious way by a person in authority, that needs to be dealt with, right? And there is no number that you can tell me is okay before I stop paying attention to that. But likewise, I think sometimes we go too far in saying, right, these killings represent some type of systemic thing that's going on. Maybe in the 60s, I mean, we can have that conversation. But I think where we are in America now, all accountability has to be local. all accountability has to be local, right? So the media shows us what's going on a national front, but in order for things to change in a major way, it's going to take individuals and leadership in localities or municipalities to begin to steer the tide, right? And I'm not just talking about politicians, right? I mean, there's 7 aspects of every society. You have family, you have education, you have politics, you have media, you have Wall Street or economics, you have the arts, and then you have like sports, right? Entertainment. That we need strong leadership in every last one of these categories in all of these cities in order for full accountability or the fullness of what we think we can get to come to fruition. So when somebody says to me that, okay, cops only killed 10 people in 2019, that is a way for them to kind of sweep what's going on under the rug. I got a problem with that, right? Because that's only one area. We need to talk about the totality of what it is for a human to exist, right? So when someone says, okay, 73% of African Americans, don't have a father. So if you fix that, that'll solve everything. I got an issue with that. I mean, yes, those things are important and there needs to be accountability for those things. But to think that only focusing on that one avenue without having conversations or really making change in the totality of a human experience, it really irks my nerves a whole lot. So by God's grace, man, as I continue to take office this upcoming July, if I could help people kind of take a step back from only seeing things in one lens and look at really the totality of people's shared experiences and shared existences, I think we can really begin to make some change happen. Now, I'll say all that. Chesapeake has done a very good job as of late doing that, right? I mean, there was a time where the city of Chesapeake was a good old boy system, right? If you weren't a part of a certain party, if your skin didn't look a certain way, you're not going to have success in the city, right? But the tide is changing, right? You have me on city council, the youngest city councilman in the history of the city, right? Wow. And I think that's huge to have Police Chief Wright, Calvin Wright, leading our police force. I think that's huge. We have tremendous city leaders, in our Black pastors. We actually just had a march led by the Coalition of Black Pastors. I think that is huge, right? So you're seeing individuals within our city, not just in one aspect of politics or not just one aspect of education, individuals from different walks of life and leadership in different walks of life coming together and saying, hey, not here in this city. And if we can have that thing replicated around, I mean, it's going to be tougher in depending on the circumstances, but if we can begin to replicate that mindset of individuals taking the leadership role in the sphere of influences that they're given, I think we can kind of see the tide beginning to change. But also individuals owning up to the fact that we all have a role to play. And I'm not just talking about Black people, right? We all have a role to play in this redemptive work that's going on. And if you look at I'm about to get a little theological on y'all for a second.
Yeah, I want to chime in on that too when you get a chance.
Yeah, if you look at the 2 greatest reformational events that have happened, for Blacks, right, post being set free from slavery, you have the formation of the Black church, right, in the late 1700s, and you have the Civil Rights Movement, in 1964, right? Well, not the 1960s. That's civil. We got the bill in 1964. The thing that made these things effective was the diversity of individuals coming together to get things done, right? So, with the Black church, you have individuals leaving, right, in Philadelphia, leaving the oppression of being viewed as second-class citizens and going to start their own church. But then you also begin to see other individuals from outside of Black culture saying, you know what, that was wrong what we were doing to those individuals. And then they starting to come along that umbrella. And you see the formation of a Black church. And from that, you get all kind of businessmen. You get politicians, leaders coming from that experience. But then you fast forward to the next great reformation that happened in the African-American community will be the 60s. And you never really see a march when it's just Black people, right? I mean, it's mainly Black people, but you have individuals from outside the culture also saying, you know what? Not only do I see that there's an injustice here, but I'm coming alongside you to kind of help rectify it. And then you see things begin to change. We're seeing some of that here.
If I could chime in on that.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I would say that's, to a certain aspect, yes, that's true. I don't think change happens by one group of people, but at the same time, I understand it started by those who are most oppressed, you know, and I say that because imagine, you know, before Frederick Douglass went and spoke to the abolitionists about the horrors of slavery, they will probably think, oh, slavery, we don't need to do it anymore. You know, we don't, it's okay because those who are enslaved aren't speaking up about it. I think anytime you have those who are most oppressed and they start speaking out about it, yes, it's up to others to come along with it. But without those who are directly, you know, underneath that boot, so to speak, without them saying anything, then nothing's going to, you know, is going to get done. I think, you know, Vernon, you know, and Carl, going back to my speech before council, it was the fact that the acknowledgement of systemic issues. There are systemic racism issues that occurs within America because of the system that was designed and created for, and not created for Black people. It was created for other people and for white people, so to speak. And so when you look at the formation of policing in this country, when you go all the way back to the historical nature of it, the Fugitive Slave Act, you go back to slave patrols who were basically trying to get the slaves who run away, and you look at that and you say, all right, how does that compare to today when a Black person ends up dead for just a minor traffic violation? You know, how does that, something that happened way back in 1800 still occurs today? Because that's a systemic issue that continuously happens. I want to give you all some statistics about just criminal justice, racism, systemic issues. Black people are more likely to be stopped by the police more than white people. They're 2 times more likely to be pulled over and 5 times more likely than white people to say they've been pulled over because of the color of their skins. Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by the police than white people, although a recent study just showed that they're 5 times more likely. I believe that study was done by Ep6, I believe it was. That was a 2019 study, but 3 times more likely to be killed by the police. And I think African Americans are only 13% of the population in America. So whenever someone says, well, police kill more white people than they kill Black, well, Black people are a minority of the population. Of course, they would kill more white people because white people are the majority of the population. Mm-hmm. Black people are arrested 2.5 times more often than white people. And they make up more than 28% of all arrests, even though they are only 13% of the population. Black people are 25% more likely to be denied bail. And Black men who do receive bail are given 35% higher bail amounts than white men. Mm-hmm. Black men get 25% longer sentences than white men for the same crime. Nearly 50% of everyone serving life and virtual life sentences is Black, 50%. Black people are 5.9 times more likely to be incarcerated than white people, would make up 40% of everyone behind bars. Black people are 4 times more likely to be on parole. Black people are 4 times more likely to be on parole than white people. They also remain on probation and parole a lot longer. Black men are less likely to find jobs upon reentry than white. I mean, there are systemic issues, and you say, well, how does this happen? I mean, if you look at, for instance, that was just the criminal justice system. Now let's look at the housing, and redlining. When Blacks necessarily made their transition off the farms land, off the slavery fields and off the fields, and made this transition and pilgrimage up north to Chicago and areas like that, the whites saw this and was like, no, they're going to bring down the property value. We don't want to live here no more. They can only be in certain communities. And so they were denied housing. They were denied certain areas they could live in from fear of bringing down the housing value. You look at those African Americans who served in our military, for example, those who served in World War II, those who served in Vietnam, and those in the wars before. When they came home from those wars, and one, they weren't appreciated, but also dealing with mental health issues, but also they weren't allowed to take advantage of their GI Bills.
Right.
And GI Bills were specifically designed to help create housing. And why is housing so important? Because it creates generational wealth. It creates generational wealth and going forward. So you look at those type of systemic issues. You look at our education. Let's talk about education, where African American Black students are disproportionately suspended at higher rates than they are their white counterparts. And why is that? These are systemic issues that we need to be proactive about, but we also need to acknowledge. The difference is the change comes about when everyone works together, but you have to acknowledge, the problematic and systemic issues you have, because if not, you can't have one segment of your population saying, stop killing us, Black Lives Matter, and another one population going, where all lives matter. It's like, well, that sends a sharp signal, particularly to a race that no other race in the world had to deal with American slavery, right? Let's get this straight. And y'all got me wound up now, right? Here's the thing. When people talk about slavery, they say, well, Blacks had slaves in Egypt and there were slaves in other countries. There is no form of slavery like American slavery. For instance, when Senator Tim Kaine said, and he caught a lot of flack for it, and said America invented slavery, and I don't want to put words in the senator's mouth, but what I believe he was referring to is there's no slavery like American slavery, because it was so harsh. It was so demeaning. You have basically demeaned people from a human level down to property, on level with cows and cattle.
Yes.
No other slavery is about it. Slavery in other parts of the world throughout history was indentured servitude. It was basically like, you can have your family, you can live here, you can stay there, but you work for me. American slavery, they ripped up families, they raped and pillaged women and men, they sold kids, they basically disconnected, they stole people. There was no slavery like American slavery. So in that aspect, American did create the harshness of slavery. And those issues, when you look on what we are dealing with today, is the lack of acknowledgement. When you hear African Americans, and I'm not speaking for the African Americans, I'm speaking from my perspective. When you hear the Black American talk about reparations, it's about equity. It's about being able to live off the labor that your ancestors have already done the work. It's not about a handout. It's not about someone looking for a handout. It's like America was built on the back of slavery. That's what the Revolutionary War was fought over. Though Thomas Jefferson and the founders of this country did not want to get rid of their slaves because it helped them gain their freedom from Britain. You know what I mean? So that was what that was fought of. And when they gained their freedom from it, slavery was such a cash cow. It was like, we can't let it go now. So in that aspect of it, when African Americans built this country up, there should be some form of now bringing us into on an even level playing field with equity coming here. And if you want to put it into a historical context, Japanese got reparations from being in intern camps in 1945 for World War II. You have, Jewish survivors got, reparations from the Holocaust and from the United States. So, but why is it that every other group that was allowed to become whole? The Indians got their land reservations. They have their own set of laws. They have their own cut out. African Americans tried that with the Freedmen's Bureau, but I believe it was at that time Grant who allowed the white Southerners basically to come back and take their land back after the Civil War, because they didn't want African Americans owning all this land and have poor white people like, oh, you know, like now I have to live with a slave or someone who used to be my property telling me what to do. So that created a form of sharecropping, right? So America is about, now what you're seeing now in this country is about the equity that African Americans have been fighting for, not only just from a financial and generational wealth standpoint, but just from a first-class citizen standpoint. So we are first-class citizens. You know, we should continuously be over-policed, right? We should be able to live what we want. We should have the right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what I believe this conscious shift is about. And what you're seeing now is a lot of the companies you see, and I'm not gonna call any of them out, but a lot of companies, well, now they see it's economically feasible for them to say that because they don't want to lose out on that income. And so, but I think it goes back to start with, there are problems. Everyone had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And once we acknowledge those problems, we can begin to solve them. And that was my whole speech to my city council, who quite a bit have been on there for 15 plus years, is that it's not business as usual anymore. No, it's no business as usual in any form, shape in America. Nothing is business as usual that somehow they're gonna march and then they'll be quiet and we'll go back doing the same thing. No, let's acknowledge the pain that is here, that has existed, that African Americans have been screaming from the top of their lungs for years, that they died for, that they marched for, that they sang for. Let's acknowledge that. Let's not just completely just look at, the looting or the vandalism, because again, nobody has the right to loot or vandalize anybody's personal property, right? That's not the way. But don't just look at the symptoms and not look at the cause of it. So I just want to add my 2 cents. So now I hope I wasn't too long-winded.
No, you good. And I actually had to step out and deal with my kids a couple of times, so I didn't hear everything that you said. But definitely the first point and the last point that I heard, and some of the stuff in between, I agree with. Some of the stuff, man, I don't agree with, but that's another conversation for another day. We can have that. Not trying to have 2 black men arguing or disagreeing too much on Facebook Live.
We gotta have that conversation. I get it.
Disagree on that one. But I will say the point I was getting to was your first and your last point. That and I hope it didn't seem as if I was saying something other than that. Definitely, there has to be an acknowledgement from the people who are saying that they're oppressed. Individuals to stand up and know their worth, but then with that, I think there needs to be acknowledgement from people who are outside of that culture or outside of that oppressive group to say, you know what, I recognize that what has been done to you is wrong too. So that's what I was getting to. Yes, I don't, like I said, I don't know a lot of the other things you were going back and forth. We can talk about that offline at another date and build on that. I'm excited to do that with you. So, yeah.
Look, this is a good, this is the beginning of, I think a lot of conversations that are going to have to happen at level of, I think what both of you described, it's so complex, and to try and fix 400 years of oppression, in an hour and a half on Facebook and and city council meetings.
That's kind of what I was getting to. It's such a nuanced situation that no one person can come and say, this is it, right? You have to be able to look at it from different lenses and have those uncomfortable conversations like Aaron said. And I love having those conversations. But and it also is somebody got to be righteous, right? In the whole entire deal. So it does you no good to recognize that something is happening to a neighbor and then just walk away from it, right? That there has to be some type of righteousness that compels individuals, to also say, yeah, I'm doing you wrong, let me stop. Stop doing that thing. So,
but I think one of the things
I'm sorry, go ahead, Vernon.
Well, I was going to just say, one of the things that I want to take away, and for people that are watching or continue to watch for some time, is that there are different skill sets, there are different approaches to solving all of these problems, and there's no one way. And the thing that I'm happy about and excited about is that both of you have similar skill sets, different skill sets, and ways to go about it, along with all of us. I mean, you know, what Carl's doing with his position with the PA, and my world in the finance and investing world, that collectively we've got to all coordinate and hear different ideas. And what's working in the 7-5 may not work in Seattle. It may not work in DC. Right. I mean, and that's where the nuances, and that's where we've got the kind of big picture piece, but then the execution, and it's going to evolve based on those local dynamics.
I think it's, again, I completely agree. And I think it's important, you know, particularly people who are listening to, look, Black people are not monolithic. You know, we think differently, you know, we experience these different things. And for me, what I've read throughout history is, you know, the fact that there are more than ways to get to an answer. You know, if 5 is the goal, I may think 4 + 1 is the easier way. You may think 3 + 2. You know what I mean? We're both all right. And so one thing, I agree with that, but I also learned that, you know, our differences, because it's very complex within the African-American community about, you know, what direction we should go, or what should we do, or who's right, who's wrong. We all are right. You know, why can't we all build together? Why can't we learn? Why can't we try your way? Why can't we do both ways? And that's one of the things I saw, whether between, I think we saw historically between Martin and Malcolm, or between, you know, Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, you know, or even between, you know, the NAACP, who at one point in time, because they were educated and were living in the North, they kind of looked down on those who were still in the South, who worked on the field. You know, we should be more united. We should be more united in our effort for equality, for equal justice. And I hate and hate is a very strong word, but I really hate
dislike.
Right. But that narrative of Black people competing for move the group ahead. You know what I'm saying? To move our race forward. There is no competition between us because we want the same thing. You know what I mean? It's all right, bro, or sister or whoever. You got this idea. I'm gonna get behind you 100%. You know, I think we go this way. Support me in that. Let's. There's more than one way. You know, and like Vernon and Don, you were saying as well, is, listen, the more people come together, I don't care what color you are, the more people come together, the more we can work together, the better off humanity will be. We are all, you know, human. And it's very important that we acknowledge those who are, you know, oppressed and feeling those injustices. And that was, you know, the point I was pretty much, you know, trying to make is, acknowledging whoever those paying. I heard a couple comedians say, and about their wives come over and their wives say, well, babe, you love me? You know, do you love me, to her husband? And he goes, well, I love all women, you know, or something like that. And it's like, what? It's like, what are you talking about? Or the simple fact of, you know, again, and this from a historical point, one point in time, African Americans were considered property, right? We were considered like livestock. And so here you have an endangered species list, right? Where they look at everything. Let's say they look at like the polar bears, right? And they say, well, loss of environment, loss of habitat, loss of food or predators. And yet we place them on an endangered species list. Nobody goes, well, all species lives matter. Everybody should be on the species list, right? What is now is like, you're looking at African Americans, you go, they're over-policed, they're mass incarcerated, they dying at a higher rate from COVID, they don't have adequate access to healthcare, the education system is not on par with those around the country. Talk about generational wealth, and everybody goes, well, all lives matter. You know, that doesn't equate. That doesn't equate. And so I think we have to acknowledge the pain and injustices African Americans are going through now. And for the record, when people say Black Lives Matter, yeah, there are groups, and some people try to use it for political statements. But for me, Black Lives Matter is not a political statement. It's not a political statement. It's a human statement. It's a human statement. And so I want to just drive that home when, you know, as an elected official, when I say Black Lives Matter, I'm not talking about no group. I'm not talking about, you know, no politics. I'm talking about a race of people, my race of people. I'm talking about Black Americans. Our lives matter, and our kids needs to hear that. So,
man, I tell you what, you guys, man, you know, I've seen you in different lights. And what's most impressive about this conversation is obviously it's one that our country is dealing with. And what you guys represent is where it starts, and particularly at the local level, which I think one of you said earlier. You know, we keep looking at November 4th election, but these local elections are so important for keeping these messages on point. And I just want to say, man, for you guys, you know, Vernon and I were here just to listen, and for you guys to really share, because it's important as we started off listening to your football and your academic experience, and then leading up to this discussion and listening to you guys eloquently, you know, discuss the issues that are facing our country, our communities. Man, it's just overwhelming. So I really, really want to thank you guys. I know you're very busy in your professional lives. Man, I'm so happy and proud to see you guys make these shifts throughout the course of your life, and to see you here, man, to know that the 757 is going to be in good shape for a long time to come, man. We're very proud and we're glad. And as we at Vernon always say, man, we're here for either one of you guys.
Absolutely.
For life.
thank you.
For life. This is very, very important to us. So, man, I want to thank you and for taking the time out. We'll be in touch again. I know we both of us reached out to each of you to discuss some ideas that we want to embark on leading up to this year, and we'll talk about those things that we can do to empower young people to get involved in the voting registration process and others, and just get involved in their lives altogether. So, you know, we'll be reaching out to you guys shortly, man, and we'll be looking to lead you and help you any way we can, my friends. So,
I'm here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
But I want to say thank you so much, man. Go
Thanks.
ahead, Doc. Yep.
No, I just want to also, man, give you your flowers too, bro. Like, appreciate y'all being strong Black men, you know, that we can follow, whose example we can follow, right? And showing us how to reach back, help somebody else. So I always say, I think true success is not only defined by our own milestones, but by the number of people who reach back and pull along the way. And thank y'all for doing that for us.
Most definitely. Thank you, Vernon and Carl. Man, again, looking at y'all professionalism, how y'all handle y'all stuff as well. I'm always learning, always trying to grow, man. And you guys have done so much for the youth in our community and our region as well, to be able to look back and to say, y'all held those camps and gave a platform for me and like men like Don to come back and share what we've done thus far. But that wouldn't happen without you all having the heart and the mind to bring us back, man, and to do this. So thank you for this platform as well.
Awesome, man.
We appreciate y'all. We appreciate you. Much love.
Well, until the next time, man, y'all stay blessed, and we'll talk soon, because we got a lot of work to do.
Awesome.
I'll be blessed, man.
My friend.
All right.
Take care, guys.